morning to you. Today is Thursday, 21st of May, 2026. My name is Francisco Gaffney, and this is my daily streaming all about governance, risk, compliance, and advisory boards. We are right away into the model, day 3 or 4 actually, of going through this advisory board operating system. And today's topic is at the bottom of the model, which is the controls and resilience. So the operating word today is systems, or this is a milestone that we are aiming with this operating model. And I say milestone because systems is not software all the times, right? Because people say, oh, the systems, or they call it IT department. But this is an assumption that actually systems is always technology, hardware, software. In reality, systems are the things that actually constitute your operating procedures, your workflows, where the things will go one after the other in a way that produce certain results and in a timing order, with a sequence, with a capacity, etc. That's predictable, all that good things about the systems. So this is where the businesses might look strong but still being fragile. And that sounds contradictory, but it's common. And I'm going to explain this. The company might be profitable, the clients are real, the teams are experienced, the founder yourself has built something valuable, right? Yet the control environment is still informal. And what I mean with this is that approvals depend on a personal judgment. Risk get discussed after something goes wrong. It's not a risk or formal prevention triage in terms of preventing risks. All risks are disregarded without explaining why. And then there's a very good reason why to explain risks, why you are disregarding these or avoiding them. And or cyber, as mentioned, sits in the IT department when it's a responsibility of the whole organization, not just the owner or the IT department. Other things that you find that the projects continue because nobody wants to stop them, which actually that starts with. We spoke about this yesterday, very in very much detail. When you don't have the kill switches or the triggers to say we are going to discontinue this because actually it's devaluating the organization, it's not adding value to the organization, right? So in these cases, the founders, like yourself, remain the backup for almost everything: late deliveries, tricky suppliers, pending questions, escalations from clients, you name it. So that is in reality very exhausting. It's also very risky because as the business grows, complexity grows faster than your ability to personally check on everything. So let's take a look at 3 problems with this. Problem number 1 is you steal the control tower of the airport, of which is your company, right? So you are the person that is overseeing absolutely everything. And in many 50-person firms and beyond, the founder knows where the weak spots are, right? So, but you still knowing which are the clients that need watching. You still knowing which managers avoid conflicts. You still knowing what suppliers are sleeping, which projects are losing value, which financial approval is technical within policy but commercial unwise. So that knowledge feels very useful, but at the same time it's creating the boomerang effect, because actually even if you have a meeting with your team and make a decision, there's no accountability because everybody comes back to you at the same time, or when the things start to get tricky and consume your time, right? So yes, it feels and it is useful, but it's not. At the same time, if you want a warning signal, this is the signal that actually what's going on here. If controls depends on you, and you recognize any of the patterns I mentioned above, so the business has an institutionalized control, which is you. It's a personal control. It's not institutionalized. Sorry, it's depending on you all the time, right? So this is a problem. Problem number 2 is that the business has meetings but no risk pools. And remember that we mentioned yesterday was a monthly momentum that you have to watch and a quarterly pattern of the things. So many companies have plenty of meetings, leadership meeting, project meetings, finance, operations, client meetings, you name it. So the issue is that risk moves through those meetings in fragments. So one team sees margin pressure, others see delivery drift, for example, or people strains, or cyber exposure with the IT departments. Others see customer dissatisfaction, but nobody often holds the whole risk picture like the advisory board model that I'm showing here. So the first time that you see the full issue is after it has become expensive or already is a slap in the face or is a constraint in the organization, because everything is so scattered, because there are so many people now in the organization that even if everything coming back to you, you don't have the full vision of all these little problems are happening everywhere. And the third problem that many times happen at this level is a low value projects stay live too long, meaning that this is one of the perhaps the quietest drains in a growing business. Projects get launched with energy, right? So let's go and do this. Then they lose momentum, and the original sponsors get busy. They get taken for another things. They are distracted. The business case start to weaken. But guess what happens? The costs start to escalate very quickly, because and the value of the organization start to decrease, and the expenses start to be more visible in something that actually is not producing any profits. I'm not saying revenues, profits. So the team feels awkward about stopping, because they say, well, it's working, it has a timing, it's produced results, but effectively what profits are producing. So the project remains alive, they are taking time and attention and perhaps status, but no one's called it a failure. So they call it ongoing, right? So it's ongoing, it's in amber, we're going to fix here and there a few things, we are going to make it work. But at the end, nobody called the shots and say, these have to stop now. So what you need to do as a founder, you need to be able to ask very clearly, what do we stop here? What do we stop in this organization that doesn't produce profit? And guess what? We have a very good example. I mentioned that yesterday. Steve Jobs, when he rejoined Apple in '97, he did that. He discontinued 75% of the production line of Apple. And the reason why is because everything was working. There was nothing wrong with that. The biggest problem was that they were competing feature by feature, software by software, gadget by gadget with other 300 other manufacturers in the market. So was not something wrong in terms of what they were doing. Is what that reality is, that was not producing the results that a company was aiming for. That's the right thing. So imagine this in other words, imagine this like your business is a very fast car on an unmarked road. So the speed feels good, right? Until the fog rolls in. So then the road is narrow, nobody knows where you are going, there's no guardrails, there are no signals in the road, there's nothing, but the speed doesn't stop. Yeah, you're not slowing down, you're continuing that speed, but the visibility and what the dangers are in front of you are start to get very, very dangerous, if you may, because you don't know what's going on next. So as a board advisor, what I would propose to is the following to consider. Number one is to collect the current control picture, right? And this is an exercise that can be done very easily. You don't have to be a polished exercise. This is just a collection of information to understand where you're standing. So that means what is the incident stories, the approval maps, the live projects, recurring meetings, cyber exposure, if you have a lot of exposure with cybersecurity, supplier risk, delivery misses, and the biggest point of friction in your organization. So once you collect all that evidence, that could be a few titles only, then ask this question: where do decisions get stuck, right? So if you put all these titles there and then put the questions on the left and say, where decisions get stuck? And then you should have names there, right? Or teams. And the second question would be, where do errors repeat, right? the third question, where it could be, where does the founder still approve too much, right? So where the founder or the manager or yourself as a managing director, whatever is the case, where you are approving too much instead of the team having ownership of those things. And the fourth question could be, where is the risk discussed and where it is avoided. So if there's no risk discussion under all these titles, then hold on a second. Why we are avoiding this conversation? Because we have to talk about risk. It's not to make a panic attack about everything. It's just to make sure that you have a better visibility, as we mentioned, the widening road and the fog. So then you start to put pylons everywhere or signals of where risk might happen. So then you are aware of them, and then you can instead of reacting to things, you can respond to things, which is a very, very nice position to be. The second thing I would suggest is create a risk pulse. And remember that we talk about momentum on monthly momentum, which is what's going on month on month. And then we have to understand or identify patterns, and that you can do that on quarterly basis. So risk pulse is simply a monthly view of the business, right? So back to the risks. Top commercial risk, operational risk, people risk, financial risk, compliance risk, technological, cyber risk, whatever is the case. And each risk has an owner, a status, a movement since last month, and the next action. And that's pretty much it. So you put all these risks here, and then you have what is moving, what is the status, and who is the owner. So it's not a long document to produce. It's a visible rhythm of what are the risks in your organization. And these titles can change according to your organization, but definitely you have now a map of risks that can fit in a page, and then you have the capacity to say, okay, how we need to address where and why. And the third thing that I suggest is an independent challenge. And this, what that means, this is where the advisory board matters, and we apply this model in full. So management teams often normalize their own friction, right? So it's normal. This is a way that we've done business before, or this is a way that we've been doing business since ever. And here is the things that you start to identify. People get used to workarounds. Yes. So actually what is normalized means actually a workaround now is normalized. So it started as a workaround, and then all of a sudden is part of the normal process of everybody doing the same that thing. That is not right. They tolerate messy approvals. Like once we worked with a company that have 5 people to approve anything. 5 people. What is the need for 5 people to approve in an organization of 45 people? I think I was 45 people. 5 approvers. Pretty much every single manager, director, and accounting and need to approve everything. That was an absolutely massive bottleneck in terms of get things done. So, or they accept poor project discipline, right? So like everything is very formally agreed, and then you don't have the evidence to track back or the traceability of the linearity of the things, where they're coming from, and the project goes and then start to get very messy and say, what happened there? So people try to catch up to find solutions when the blueprint of the project was the first thing that it should have been done. And that is normal in so many companies. Or is everything on the owner's head? So it's not actually the project has no discipline. It's actually is always dependent on you. They say, what we have to do here, what we have to do here, what is the next thing that we have to do? Even if the people know what they have to do because they've been doing this before, they're still depending on somebody to get, yes, go and do that. Yeah. So that is when they treat you as escalation as a normal thing. So if they are always picking up the phone or coming to your office asking, hey, we've done this. What about this? We go this now? And you go and say, yeah, go and do that. And then you have to shift your attention from whatever you're doing to the next thing, and then go back to where you are. And there are studies that show that actually that shift of attention, or the micro shifts of attention, are very taxing on your stress levels, right? So if you're wondering sometimes why you're so stressed, it's because your micro levels of attention are shifting too often. And it's not multitasking, as some people they believe that is multitasking. Is attention spans are very short in too many things, and then you start to lose track of what's going on, right? So what external advisors ask different questions, right? So what could be one of the questions that I will be asking if we are working together? One is why this is still open, right? So if you have many projects open, why they are open? Who owns those projects, right? So they're still open, but who owns them? What evidence says this is improving, right? So if they say, oh, this is ongoing because of this, is ongoing, okay, who owns this? And what is the evidence that say that is getting to fruition, to resolve this, or to get to close this particular project? And the other question would be the other way around. So what prevents you to stopping this project at all, right? Because actually, if they've been dragging for months, or when was that? 2 weeks ago, in a factory, we identified something like $1 million in products beside the production line, right? So they were already ready to dispatch. And the question was to whom? And we calculated based on raw material, labor hours, etc. It was around $1 million. And so who is going to dispatch this when, and when you're going to collect this? And we went through 3 people in the organization. We couldn't get a straight answer. That is $1 million sitting in your warehouse or beside your production line, ready to be shipped, and you don't know to when it's going to be invoiced. You know pretty much roughly how much it costs you. So that's pretty much a very dangerous situation to be, because, and guess what? At the end, they have to call the owner and I say, we need to understand what is going on here. And the man have to come back to the company and shuffle his notes to understand. I say, oh, right, okay, this project I know is whatever was the case, right? I'm not going to disclose that. But $1 million sitting there, and 3 people asked, nobody could get a straight answer. And the end, they have to call the owner to come back to the office and answer that question. So the other question that we usually ask is what controls would prevent this from becoming a board level issue, or an owner issue in this case, or an executive team issue, right? So why we have to ask 3 people to get an answer when something that is should be fully documented, and with an owner to respond to this, right? Okay, so let's see what you gain working with me. So it's basically 3 things. First, you have the full model to implement in your organization and say, oh, this is too much work. No, it is not. I'm going to explain why. We are going to get 3 business outcomes. Sorry, you're going to be business outcomes here, not just activities to do and report back. It's business outcomes, very specific. You're going to get differentiators and risk reductions. In terms of business outcomes, I can mention that you gain a control rhythm that sits in the business, not in your memory or your capacity, or as we happened a couple of weeks ago, we have to call the owner back to the company to understand why that million was sitting there. So you get a risk pulse, a cleaner approval path, an independent audit view, and project kill switches, and a 30-day control plan as the one that we mentioned earlier. So this gives you more clarity and room to develop more things rather than start to fixing things as they go along. In the members, but the ones that we consider that is the best swaps to make sure that the next milestone is achieved at the best time and capacity possible. So the control mix changes as the risk profiles are changing, right? In terms of risk reduction, you reduce the key person control risk, which is yourself as a founder or your reduced management team. You reduce the drift in the low value projects, right? So you reduce the chance to that something goes wrong with cybersecurity, with compliance, operational issues remain hidden within the functions of the people or the organization, or the lack of documentation of what had to be done when and why. So you reduce all these decision bottlenecks. You also reduce the founder strain, your strain. So you remember you have 24/7. So you don't have more hours or more days in a week than anybody else. So you need also to have a watch on yourself. And that matters because tired founders miss things. And this story that I mentioned earlier about the micro shifting of attention on things, not because you are careless or you don't have more capacity. It's because the load becomes too high. There's too much to handle. So a proper operating system respects you enough to stop treating you as a safety net for everything else in your organization. Now, one action you can take home today and is doable in 30 minutes or less, sorry, is to write down the last 5 issues that reach you and should not have reached you as the founder, and they should have not reached you at all. And then ask 5 questions, right? What happened? Who owned it? Which control failed? Which meeting should have spotted this earlier? What will prevent a repeat issue again? So if and the key here is to look for the repetition. When you start to identify repetitions, then you have a pattern. And when you have a pattern, is something that I say, okay, now we have certain things that we can fix, and we can fix it, and then you can do a plan for the next 30 days, how to fix those little patterns, right? So that's where we have these 2 distinctions. Monthly is for 2 meetings is for momentum, what is going on. And quarterly meeting is to identify on those month what are the patterns. And these kind of questions are very useful to understand what are the patterns, so you can start to improve things very fast and very quickly. So let's pause here for today and reconvene tomorrow, because tomorrow we move into transformation and reinvention, which is the left quadrant of the operating model. That is where yesterday's successes start to becoming today's drag. So if the business does not renew itself while it has a choice, then pretty much you're pushed around until you lose the relevancy in the market and potentially the company starts to decline. So if interested in international advisory board, you have more than 50 employees or more than 10 million in euros, pounds, or dollars in revenue, let's have a chat, because I would love to understand where you're coming from, where you are today, and where you're going. And with that information, we can put an international advisory board around your company to achieve these successes that the Development Bank of Canada already published with companies that have advisory boards, which is 24% increase in revenue and 18% increase in productivity. So have a great day, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.